Okay, good morning. So first things first, I'm going to go and ask for an election of the chair for this subcommittee. Do we have any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Michelle Bauer for chair of the subcommittee.
You.
And second, please.
Okay, thank you. So first thing we want to talk about is the housekeeping. Do you want to talk about that?
Thank you, Chair. So just to note that this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the website for a minimum of 6 months. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point along Bradley Road under the flyover. There is a test alarm at 10:15, so we will just need to pause proceedings briefly. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to explain that we've received apologies from Councillor George Farquhar, and I've stepped up to take his place. Next, we'll go on to declarations of interest. I'm going to ask each subcommittee member in turn if they have any declarations of interest.
No declarations for me.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman-Law.
And no declarations of interest here.
Okay, thank you. So the protocol for public speaking at hearings has been explained to each person here already. It's included in the agenda sheet for noting. So the first matter that we're going to discuss is Nala Lounge, 135 to 137 West Hill Road, Bournemouth. Okay, so sorry, I'll go around everybody and get our instructions first. Should we start with the subcommittee?
Good morning. I am Councillor Keddy of Queen's Park and Charleston Ward. Councillor Chapman, member of the subcommittee and member for Albany and Warm Valley.
And I'm Councillor Dower, who is the chair of this and also councillor for Kidson Ward. Next, we'll go on to the officers.
Chair, can I just point out Councillor Castle is here as a reserve member. He's not going to take part in any of the proceedings or the decision making. He's just here to observe.
Thank you.
Tanya Jardine, licensing officer, and presenting the report.
Andy Hill, one of the senior environmental health officers.
Sorry, and I'm Linda Cole, advising the subcommittee today.
And Jill Holyoake-Clark to the subcommittee.
I'm Philip Day from Lacey Solicitors, and I'm here to represent the applicant Nala Lounge Limited. To my immediate left is Kathleen Rowley. Kathleen effectively owns the applicant company, and sitting next to her is Mr. Ismail Gunduz, who is proposed as the designated premises supervisor. The two gentlemen sitting behind are here simply to observe and won't play any part in the proceedings. Abdul Dirdir is in fact one of the managers of the premises, and Jackson Warrener works with me at Lacey's.
Thank you. So before I run through the procedure, can I run through, please may I check that all persons who have given notice of their intention to speak have been identified? Yeah. Any person who wishes to withdraw a representation or wishes not to speak has also been identified.
Andy Hill, Environmental Health. We do wish to withdraw our representation. However, I will be available if should any of the members wish to question me on any discussions with the applicant, how we reach mediation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I'll take that as now correct and approved. So I'll now explain the proposed procedure and the order of speaking for the hearing as follows. So the licensing officer will present the report. Questions of the licensing officer by all parties, members of the subcommittee to go first. Then the applicant will make their application, and then questions to the applicant by all parties, member of the subcommittee go first. The responsible authority will make their the responsible authority won't make their representation. Questions of the rest of that won't happen either then. Questions. No. Questions that you want to ask Mr. Hill, just for clarification. Okay. Although the responsible authority isn't making representation today, if we do have questions of the responsible authority, Andrew Hill, we will submit those questions. Thank you. Have there been a number of representations? There have been a number of representations from other persons not attending the hearing, which the subcommittee has read. All parties will be given an opportunity to sum up, with the party who spoke last to go first. The hearing will then conclude. The subcommittee will then deliberate in private with the legal advisor and clerk present. A summary notification of the subcommittee's decision will be given following the committee's deliberations today. This will then be followed by a full decision notice within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held. The notification of decision will include information about the right to appeal as appropriate. I will now ask all parties to confirm agreement on the proposed procedure or make representations.
I'm happy with that, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So I will take this as confirmed. Finally, may I remind all parties speaking not to repeat information which they've already given in writing, but to expand on their written representations. All questions are to be asked through the chair, and there will be no cross-examination of parties. I will now ask the licensing officer to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. So Mr. Philip Day of Lacey Solicitors submitted an application on behalf of Nala Lounge Limited for a new premises licence at 135 to 137 West Hill Road. These premises already benefit from a premises licence which permits late night refreshment Sunday to Wednesday 2300 to 0000 hours and Thursday to Saturday 2300 to 0200 hours, and the supply of alcohol out on and off the premises from 1000 to 0030 hours Sunday to Wednesday and 10 to 0200 hours Thursday to Saturday, as well as non-standard timings for these licensable activities on New Year's Eve. The current premises licence is subject to a review application lodged by BCP Council's Licensing Authority, and the new premises licence application being considered here today was submitted by Mr. Day by way of mediation to address the concerns raised by the responsible authorities and other persons to the review application. Mr. Day explained in the application form that the current licence does not include regulated entertainment, the plan is inaccurate and the conditions inappropriate, and the new application seeks to rectify this. The premises are described as a cocktail bar and restaurant, and the new application seeks to permit films, live music, recorded music, performance of dance, and the on and off sales of alcohol Monday to Sunday, 1000 to 0000 hours, and late night refreshments to terminate at 0030 hours, which is the closing time set out in the application. In addition, the applicant has applied for non-standard timings to allow licensable activities to be permitted from the commencement of hours on New Year's Eve apologies, until the end of permitted hours on New Year's Day. Mr. Day has advised that the new premises licence will have no effect unless the existing licence under BH1 84278 is either revoked or surrendered. The licensing office received 1 representation from Environmental Health and 4 representations from other persons on the grounds that the application would undermine the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety and the public nuisance licensing objectives. Members will note that Mr. Day entered into mediation with the Environmental Health Officer, and following extensive discussions, they have successfully mediated conditions which members will find under the supplementary information attached to the report, in particular to amended version of section M of the application provided by Mr. Day. And again, as Mr. Hill has advised, he's withdrawn his representation following this mediation. I forwarded the supplementary information provided by Mr. Day to those persons who made representations, and I'm advised by one person that despite the reassurances provided by Mr. Day, they are still concerned with the impact the noise generated by people talking whilst waiting outside to get in, smoking or waiting for taxis, for example, will have to them. We received no representations from any other responsible authorities. Members are asked to consider whether to grant this application, and should the licence be granted and the applicants fail to operate in accordance with their licence and any conditions attached to it, they will be aware that any responsible authorities or other persons may request to review of the licence at any time. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask the members of the subcommittee if they have any questions for the licensing officer.
Not at this point, thank you. Yeah, not at this point, thank you.
Okay.
Could I just ask, so the 4 reps from other persons, do they still stand, or are 3 of them being withdrawn? And we've just got 1 standing.
No, they still stand. It's just 1 responded to the supplementary information. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for the licensing officer? Okay, no questions. Thank you. So now I will ask Mr. Day to make his representation.
Thank you, Mel. I have to say that in the 20+ years that I've been in Bournemouth dealing with licensing applications, that this has probably turned out to be just about the most tortuous one that I've ever come across, certainly in this town. It started with an application to review the license, which on the face of it seemed relatively straightforward. However, various agencies then took various other steps with regard to the premises. For example, Mr. Hill over there served noise abatement notices. In fact, there is still a noise abatement notice, but it's now in its 3rd variation, the first 2 versions having been withdrawn for technical reasons. The planning department have also served a breach of condition notice, and there it is. I looked at the papers with regards to the review, and along the way it had been suggested that an application be made to vary the existing licence. And I took that on board really quite seriously, but it soon came to the conclusion that that was really not the way to go, because I would be looking to vary a licence that was subject to a review application. I was also looking at a licence which, with the greatest respect to the licensing consultant who had been dealing with it, was frankly not fit for purpose. I mean, if you look at some of the conditions for a restaurant-based premises to have SIA staff every day of the week, it didn't make sense. The plan was incorrect. The internal layout was wrong. It didn't have the conservatory at the front. and on it went. It has also been suggested, and we're dealing with a new license application, not the review at the moment, but I need, the two are so intertwined that I need to mention them. It had been suggested in the review application that one of the things that ought to be done was to attach conditions relating to noise from music. My response to that was, well, hang on a minute, your powers on a review are very extensive. The one thing you cannot do is to add licensable activities that are not already on the license, which meant that on the review, whatever else happened, the one thing that couldn't happen was for the license to be varied to include live and recorded music. It therefore followed logically that you couldn't attach any conditions relating to those licensable activities. So all the more reason to effectively tear up the old and start afresh. There were really two main aspects with which we were concerned. The first, well, actually three. The first was with regard to hours. Mr. Hill and others who had made representations with regard to the review application made it clear that they wanted the hours reduced to midnight. And my starting point was, okay, that is what we will do. So you have an application for regulated entertainment, supply of alcohol until midnight. The old 1964 restaurant hours, if I certainly remember that, but with the sort of standard, if I can call it that, drinking up time. And yes, you give people a cup of tea, cup of coffee or whatever during that last half an hour. So that was the first important thing. The second was to look at imposing conditions on the license that would address specifically the concerns of Mr. Hill with regard to noise from music. Now, I can't necessarily take you through each and every one of them, but I would hope that you've had an opportunity to look at the revised section M, and I'll come back to that in a minute, but will accept that the conditions are comprehensive. In that regard, can I also just quickly point you to the relevant part of the national guidance, which is paragraph 9.12, where it effectively says to you that, for example, it is likely that a particular responsible authority will be the licensing authority's main source of advice in relation to a particular licensing objective. For example, the police have a key role in managing the nighttime economy and should have a good working relationship with those operating in their local area. They should therefore be the licensing authority's main source of advice on matters relating to promotion of crime and disorder licensing objectives. In exactly the same way, then you take issues with regard to noise from Mr. Hill as your main source. So Mr. Hill is now content. The third point, which was really what caused the most consternation, I think, during this entire process, was that right at the very beginning of the national guidance, Secretary of State, Section 182 guidance, it talks about conditions, and it has a list that they must be appropriate, they've got to be precise, enforceable, they must be unambiguous and clear, but then the important ones. Should not duplicate other statutory requirements or other duties or responsibilities placed on the employer by other legislation. And then further down, should not replicate offences set out in the 2003 Act or other legislation. And here we have a host of other regulation and so on that have to be complied with. So what it says is, for example, if there are planning restrictions, and there are, then you shouldn't replicate those in the license or the license application. There are the smoking regulations. Thou shalt not replicate the smoking regulations in the license. There is here a noise abatement notice. Thou shalt not replicate that, but in actual fact, the application for live and recorded music does conform with the noise abatement notice that was served, because the latest version says no live or recorded music for entertainment after midnight. That is exactly what we've asked for. Just for the avoidance of doubt, if the premises are legitimately open after midnight, then they can have background music, but it's background only. So the incidental, it can't be provided as entertainment.
Can I just interrupt, Mr. D? Just to remind you that you don't necessarily have to repeat what's already down in the documentation.
Right. I'm aware of that, but I'm also aware that this is being live streamed and that we have local residents who have a particular interest in this application.
And just to remind you that the residents will have seen the documentation as well.
Yeah, not all of them necessarily will have made representations, and not all of them would therefore have seen it. So we had a fairly long and tortuous exchange of emails, which you will have seen at Appendix 4, which I'm pleased to say you can now ignore, because we have reached a mediated outcome, which is the document that is the amended section 10. I don't propose really to say anything more about that, unless you've got any specific questions. None of the local residents have appeared. You will draw your own conclusion and attach such weight as you may, but may I also remind you that any decision that you make must be evidence-based. So, for example, Ms. Jardine mentioned that one of them had said they were concerned about noise, people talking and shouting, queuing to get into the premises. Ms. Rowley can assist you. She would love it if there were queues of people waiting to get into her premises, but that's not the case. There is no evidence that that is or has been a problem. Ditto any people waiting for taxis or smoking outside. There's not a jot of evidence with regard to any of that. And Environmental Health brought their, well, initially it was Mrs. Rogers, one of your licensing officers, as a responsible authority, who started the review, supported by Mr. Hill and the police. Nearly all concerned with noise from music and so on, and not the specific issues that have now been mentioned by one of the local residents. It is also the case, for the record, that the planning officers have their responsible authorities. They haven't made any representation at all with regard to this.
Can I just remind you that this is the licensing meeting, not planning? So
yes, but they are a responsible authority and could
that
have
will be
made
the planning
representations.
will be considered separately.
Indeed. And most importantly of all, the police could have made a representation, and they have not done so. So there it is. I therefore invite you to grant the application for a new license, subject to perhaps one very small amendment, under section D, which is the prevention of public nuisance. I'm aware, and again, thank you to your officers for flagging this up to me, that there has been some slight concern about what the license has to say about smoking. It is the top of the last page of this document. There are two provisions here. The first is that if we have regulated entertainment inside the premises, then the roof and the windows of the conservatory have to be closed. And although I didn't need to say it, because the smoking regulations provide for it anyway, that means that anybody wishing to smoke would not be able to do so. So those three bits go together. Retractable roof should be kept closed, all windows shut, hold of the license, ensure the door into etc. and persons wishing to smoke shall not be permitted to do so with any part of the enclosed seating area. So if there's music going on inside, no smoking outside. And then 2 paragraphs further on, again, slightly unnecessary, but just so that everybody is clear, persons shall only be permitted to smoke in that part of the enclosed seating area that has a retractable roof, and only when the roof is retracted, you may wish to add the words and the windows open. And that's the only other amendment that we've
Thank you.
So that's the application. We're here to answer any questions you may have. There being nobody present who has made a valid representation, unless, well, it's your turn. That's it. Yeah.
I'll move on. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to now open up the questions, and I'll ask first questions of the member of the subcommittee.
Good morning, Mr. Day. Thank you for your representations. It's very comprehensive. I have a couple of questions. So when live music is taking place inside the venue, the designated smoking area will be closed. Are there any measures to stop smoking at the front of the venue?
The short answer to that is no, because you can't, because it's part of the street, and you can't stop people from smoking on the pavement, on the street, or otherwise. However, if you look at the second page of this document, you will see.
Sorry, which document?
Sorry, this is the amended conditions.
Okay.
The amended section M. Right. Under the heading of door supervision, and the wording of this was agreed with the police. The intention is that it should be risk assessed, right? But in terms of the risk assessment, it will take into account the risks associated with any act of terrorism directed at premises, disorder within or associated with the premises, and the risk of nuisance being caused by, for example, but not limited to, persons smoking outside the building after 2300 hours, which is generally regarded as the witching hour. So if the premises are obliged to carry out that risk assessment, and as you will see, that has to be done annually. But it can also be done at any time if the police request it. So if there is a problem, they have to look at it. And it may well be the solution would be you have SIA registered door supervisors. Specifically, part of their job is to make sure that people who are smoking immediately outside do so in a responsible manner. Of course, the difficulty is that even SIA door supervisors have precisely the same legal powers as you or I do, sir. But they can encourage, and of course there are various things that they can do, which is to say, you're causing a nuisance, unless you stop, that's the last time you're coming in here, and things like that. So yes, it's been addressed.
Thank you for that response. I have another question. The venue's been described as a restaurant-based business, a cocktail bar and restaurant. Could you outline why there is a need for off sales?
Dating back to 63 Act, it was automatically the case that any premises that had a non-license was also automatically entitled to do off sales. It is part and parcel of virtually every application that that one makes. It is something that really would be of concern perhaps to the police, and the police have not made any representation. That's right. I don't mean to be flippant, but it's really a question of turning it around the other way. Is there any reason why off sale should be prohibited? That there would have to be some evidence that is a problem. The presumption is in favour of grant. So, dare I say, why not? It also means, for example, that these premises, if they were providing food to be taken away or delivered from the premises, then if somebody wanted to order a beer or a bottle of wine to go with it, then they can do that as part of the order rather than having to go separately to an off license or whatever. It's fairly common.
Thank you.
Councillor Chapman, Lord, do you have any questions?
Oh, I think that's been pretty comprehensively covered. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that from my understanding is that that area that was discussed earlier is non-compliant for smoking altogether. I know it's covered by separate legislation, but that's just like clarification.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? So do we go into this?
If it assists you, ma'am, I have no intention of summing up because I'll simply be repeating what I told you a minute ago.
Just quickly, my normal question is, what are the opening times for similar premises nearby?
So they do vary, but depending, so there's restaurants as well as bars. The restaurants all close at midnight. There is one that is opened, have non-standard timings and are open until 2 a.m. or are licensed to open until 2 to supply alcohol on sales and late night refreshments, but generally midnight.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Should we just say
just
There are hotels in that area that are certainly for residents licensed 24/7, 365 days a year. I have to confess that I haven't actually dealt with any of the hotels for a long time because they're perfectly happy with their licenses, but I do know that some of them have licenses that allow functions and so on until way later than midnight.
okay, thank you. So in that case, Mr. Dave, you've expressed the point that you don't wish to sum up, you have no further things to sum up. So I will now be concluding the hearing. The subcommittee will adjourn in private with legal advisor and the clerk to deliberate. All parties will be called back into the meeting to be advised of the decision, and the full decision will be conveyed to you in writing as explained earlier. Okay. Okay, thank you. Good morning again. So I'm now going to so we're now going to explain the summary of the decision that we've made, and to confirm that a decision letter will be going out. So we've considered the debates and discussions put up to us today. We've also looked at the revised section M, plus the small updates that have been submitted today. We've also considered the public representations, and we've noted that the revised application changes the closing time till midnight, mostly, which is acceptable. So we're going to approve the decision, but also the application, I should say. I also want to acknowledge and thank the efforts of the Environmental Health Officer. We've noted the debate in the email that was happening during the mediation, and we've noted that the conditions have been updated accordingly, which has been acceptable. So that we've also noted that there are conditions in the planning application which will also need to be dealt with appropriately. But at this moment, we're approving the application. We will now be adjourning for 10 minutes for a break. Good morning. An application has been received from the Licensing Authority to review the premises licence for the premises known as Nala Tapas and Cocktail Lounge, 135 to 137 West Hill Road, Bournemouth. The matter has been brought before the Licensing Subcommittee for determination. We do have an update from our legal advisor, and Linda's going to take us through that now.
Thank you, Chair. Because of the determination that you have made in relation to agenda item 5 of the agenda, which is also it was also a premises licence application for the same premises. Mr. Day, who represents the applicant of the premises that's also subject to this review, has indicated they're going to surrender the licence, that it will be subject to the review. To give time for that, I would suggest that we adjourn this hearing of this review, further adjourn it until the 13th of March of this year, just to give time for that process to take place and for the licence to be surrendered appropriately.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any comments or questions before we adjourn?
I think it's appropriate, just for the record, for me to confirm that I have been instructed to formally surrender the existing licence, and I will deal with the paperwork as soon as I get back in front of my computer, which will be later today. In the circumstances, it will save an awful lot of time and money if we follow the course of action that your legal advisor is proposing. And thanks to her and all the other officers who have attended today for working together to achieve this outcome and save you an awful lot of time and effort. But there you are.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Day. I'm now.
So you just need to vote. Are you happy to adjourn?
Are you happy to adjourn?
Yes, happy to. Yes, happy to.
In that case, I'm now adjourning this meeting. Thank you.